Good day, I'm Martin Dinel. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer and Assistant Deputy Minister for the Cybersecurity Division of the Government of Alberta. I think the big difference with traditional cybersecurity approaches and measures, you were mainly focused on the periphery of an environment. So if I was to compare to a prison, you essentially have a fence around the prison, you might have some guards inside to monitor how things are going, you might have some cameras around the fence as well, aiming outside and inside to see what's coming at you and what's going on inside as well. But that's about the way people were doing security. They were protecting their own environment. Things have changed over the past few years where we have more solutions that are in the cloud, outside of the confines of the network of the organization, and the users are more mobile. So zero trust enables us to actually put the security not around the organization, but rather around the digital assets that are part of the organization themselves. For instance, endpoint management for devices to protect them and control them, as well as the users themselves and their identities are being controlled essentially by a team that looks after them and monitors the entry, the access to systems and things like that. The data is monitored as well. Logs exist to see who has access to what and what did they do with the data. That's essentially how it works. I think the main thing is to involve stakeholders into your program. So it could be, for instance, with your executives, make them decide what's going to happen when it relates to cybersecurity. So what I'm talking about right now is cybersecurity professionals are just that. They're experts of cybersecurity, experts of identifying and assessing risk and coming up with mitigative strategies for those risks. They're not experts at making decisions on behalf of the business. Business people understand the business, the budget, the objectives, what you're trying to do for your clients, your stakeholders. So involve them into your program, make them understand risk, and make them understand also that they are responsible for those decisions. From a stakeholder's perspective, involve them as well so that they understand their role from a security perspective in the organization. It's actually very surprising to me when I'm looking at the success of our training program and our awareness program, how involved clients become in the security of the environment once they understand that they have a role to play, that they should be able to recognize cyber threats, that they should report them to us, that we will work with them if they have some ideas, for instance, about how to secure certain assets. So that's the key thing, to get them involved. Don't keep them isolated from cybersecurity. Don't have security be something that you do in a dark room somewhere in a basement. It has to be out there in the open. You have to report your successes and don't mind discussing your failures at times, or what I prefer to call our lessons learned, because that's what happens with failures. You learn from them and you do better next time. So this is very important. This is why you need an awareness program. It's not something that people will just assume by default, and the role is not always the same depending on the stakeholder we're talking about. So I'll give an example. We have our executives are very much involved as what we call information controllers. So any set of data that belongs to a unit, a business unit, is owned by the head of the department, and they can actually delegate that to another person, and that person makes all the decisions regarding those information, the data collections that they're owning. The decisions they would make would include, for instance, we have an app that's about to go live. Should it go live at this point in time? They also make decisions on risk. Are the risks involved strong enough that we need to do something about them, or do we just accept the risk? So they're involved in that process. They're also involved in situations where, for instance, there is a disaster. When something happens and the data becomes unavailable, we need to make sure that messaging is appropriate. We also need to make sure those owners of the data collection, are involved in discussions and decisions regarding when we can bring back a system online and things like that. So it's very important that we tailor our security program, awareness program and training program based on the stakeholders and their roles. Information controllers have a particular role, risk owners have a different roles, regular users have a different role, and we need to explain to them what it is exactly. That's key to the success of the program. Once again, by involving the business themselves. The business has a very good idea of the critical digital assets, whether it's data, applications, or technology that they need to provide their services. So one of the things we do at the Government of Alberta is we have a disaster recovery team, and it's disaster planning as well. And what they essentially do is they identify all the areas that provide key and essential services at the Government of Alberta, and we start with those people. If the services are important, obviously their digital assets are going to be important as well. And then we perform risk assessments essentially on the assets to make sure we understand all the risks involved, the sensitivity of data involved, retention period, things like that. And that in itself helps us identify essentially what are the priorities across an organization. If a critical service is identified that has sensitive data, but also a high level of risks, from a security perspective and from an IT perspective, it becomes our highest priority to fix over maybe an application system that is less critical, doesn't have sensitive data, and maybe a few vulnerabilities. This is essentially how we determine and gauge what the priorities should be across the organization. That definitely speaks to my heart. Government of Alberta in February 2022 created the Cyber Alberta Community of Interest. We brought in, well, now over 600 members within the Community of Interest. Over 400 organizations are represented, all of them with some kind of a security background. They are security professionals in charge of the security of their own organizations. We share information about threats, about technologies that we experience. People who get hacked, get compromised, get ransomware, they actually come to the meetings and they talk about their experience, how it happened, so that helps prevent other organizations from getting caught. Interestingly enough, we've seen over the past couple of years more and more conferences like the Public Sector Network, and Government of Alberta has been participating in these for the past 3 years for sure, and I've participated in even more before that as an individual. Those events are fantastic because we get to talk with like-minded people who face the same issues and sometimes come up with some solutions right there on the go during discussions. Or we identify a vendor that might be able to help us essentially resolve some of the problems that we have within our organizations. The presentations themselves from experts in the industry help us think of things we might not have thought about any other way. So that is definitely the key thing. It's that collaboration, the work that is now happening amongst stakeholders, people who have the same problems, are facing the same issues, working together to resolve the issues.